Hi guys, this is Stacy Loves Paper. Welcome to my first ever video. This is my thank you card featuring some scrap cardstock. We're starting off with Stampin' Up! Cardstock. I have Groovy Guava, Hello Honey. This is Pool Party, and finally Pear Pizzazz. Now these are just scraps I had from leftover projects. We're just going to be cutting these down into strips. We're going to make them about 4 inches long by about 3/8 of an inches wide. And they don't have to be those exact measurements. We're going to be ripping them at the very bottom on the final card. So if you have a scrap that ends up being a little bit shorter, go ahead and use it. And I'm cutting these using my Fiskars paper trimmer. It's my last piece here, the Hello Honey. Now the Groovy Guava is no longer made. You could substitute Stampin' Up! Paper if you like that. Blushing Bride would work, or the Calypso Coral. If you want something that matches the Groovy Guava, try Paper Tray Ink Melonberry. Now, this is some Neenah cardstock. This is the classic natural white. It's similar to the Stampin' Up! Very Vanilla. I love Neenah. It's super smooth. It's great cardstock to use. I'm just trimming that down to 4 inches by 5 1/4, so it's going to be slightly smaller than a regular A2 size card. I'm just going to line up the pieces, see how they fit. Make sure I can get some even spacing on the ends and in the middle. As you can see, I did end up trimming those out too thick, so I did end up recutting those. Now I'm using the Stampin' Up! Powder tool because we're going to do some heat embossing. And this is the W+9 hand letter thank stamp set. We're going to use that thank and the U. Lining them up on my Fiskars stamp press here so I can get the letters on straight. Now if you notice, the thank and the U, the letters extend on either side, and if I do the whole stamp, it won't fit on the bottom of the card, so I have to stamp each one individually. And I'm just going to cover up the beginning of the U, that way it fits with the thank right next to it. I'm just using some Post-it paper. Now we're going to use some Versamark ink. It's nice sticky ink, so we can do some heat embossing using some embossing powder. Making sure I get that covered really well. Take off your mask. That's important. I have left it on before, and then you get a big blob of Versamark on your paper. I'm using the Ranger Liquid Platinum embossing powder. And this is a silver, but not super shiny, super bright. It's a little bit dull compared to actual silver, but it looks fantastic on the cream colored cardstock. So that's a really good combination. Using a paintbrush just to get off some extra powder there. I'm using the Stampin' Up! Heat tool just to melt that powder. The Stampin' Up! Heat tool is nice. It has 2 heat settings, so if you just want to dry your cardstock, if you happen to do some watercolor, you can use the low setting. And then there's a high setting for melting embossing powder. Make sure it's all nice and melted. Gonna line that up. I'm using the Score Pal crafting mat. It fits right inside of a Score Pal. You can see it's got all the grid lines, so it makes it really easy to line up all your projects. I just have to apologize about the lighting in my background there. My hands look very weird in color. I'm just lining up the first part of the thank you, the thank word, so I can stamp that next to the U, using Versamark again. And you can see the very edge of the T is not going to stamp on the paper, but that's fine. Looks kind of nice. That way the whole word is covering up the entire piece of cardstock. Use some more of that liquid platinum embossing powder. Getting off all the excess. I store my embossing powders in Sistema containers. They lock on either side, so if you happen to drop the container, none of your embossing powder is going to spill out. They come in 2 packs. I got mine at Target. I'm just heating up the thank part of the thank you. Now this part, you already heated up the U. It's not that much of an issue. It won't remelt unless you let the heat gun sit over it for a while, so don't try and do two things at once when you're heating that up, and you should be perfectly fine. So I got that all embossed at the very bottom of the cardstock. Again, as you can see, it looks really good on that very vanilla there. It's a really good combination. Now I have some vellum here. I just pulled that out of my drawer. It could be Stampin' Up! Vellum or any other brand would work. It's almost completely transparent, which I like because you really want to see the colors from your cardstock through it. I'm using a Hero Arts stamp, Heart Flourish, just one I happen to have. I like the swirls. It's a really nice bold one, so you can really see the embossing powder with it. Bold stamps work really well with this particular project. So I'm just going to line up my vellum, make sure I get the stamp. I'm just trying to stamp at the very end. You just have to remember that the edge of the stamp doesn't come down to the edge of the wood, so keep that in mind if you want to try and get it as close to the bottom as possible. That way you don't have to cut both sides of the vellum, just the one side. And the vellum is a little extra long. That way I can wrap it around the cardstock, so I'm not actually using any adhesive right under where I've stamped, so you won't be able to see the adhesive from the front of the card. It'll just all be on the back. Just using that same embossing powder, getting off all the excess there, making sure I didn't miss any areas. You can tell when nothing looks shiny anymore, then you have everything covered with embossing powder. Just using a small paintbrush just to get rid of the excess embossing powder. Heating it up again. The vellum will warp a little bit, but since you're going to be wrapping it around, it'll be pretty tight. It should get rid of all the extra vellum there, and it should look pretty flat on your card. Just heating it up till everything's shiny, then you know it's all completely melted. And you can see there at the heart, it didn't completely fill in. You can fill it in with the Versamark pen, but you'll get double stamping powder on some parts of it, so it will look a little wonky. So I find it's best just to leave it. Looks a little distressed, which always works on cards. Well, not always, but most of the time. The only person I would ever notice is my aunt. Other than that, everybody would think it's a beautiful card. So here I've got the front of my card. I'm just going to line up my cardstock. I keep everything in rainbow order. That always works out the best. So I got my pink there, my yellow, my green, then my blue. And I like to line up the two edges first, so I'll line up the Groovy Guava and the Pool Party, making sure they're evenly spaced from the top and from the sides. And then I can tape down the two middle pieces, and those will be much easier to line up and much easier to get the correct spacing. Now when you use your adhesive, you only need to use the adhesive maybe on the top third or so, because you are going to be ripping off the very bottom of the cardstock, so you don't want adhesive down there. That's all adhered, and now you can start ripping off the very bottom of the cardstock there, because you can see it was covering the thank you, but now when you rip it off, you'll be able to read the entire sentiment. Now I made this card a few times, and I find it's a little easier to take a pair of paper snips and just snip a little notch in the edge of the cardstock, so you can start ripping it a little bit easier, and you get a little more even rip when you first start it. But it doesn't have to be even. It depends on the look you want to achieve. So I'm just going to do it to all four pieces, and you can kind of roll up the bottom there if you don't want like a little V sticking down. And again, that's completely up to you how short, how long you want to make it. I'm going to just see how the vellum lines up, make sure it's all straight. Then you flip it over and then just attach the adhesive to the two ends sticking out and wrap them around and stick them down to the back of the cardstock. The vellum won't go anywhere and you won't be able to see the adhesive. I'm just going to flip it over. Again, make sure it's straight before I crease the other side. Once it's creased, it is hard to maneuver it again. So you kind of want to make sure the crease is going to go in the spot you want it. Just make sure it's lined up. Then fold it over, and you got a great vellum strip. Just use my bone folder there, make sure it's all attached really well, and you got a nice crease so you don't have too much excess on the front. going to set that off to the side, and I'm going to work on the inside of my card. I'm using the Pear Pizzazz Stampin' Up! Ink, and I'm going to use that same hand-lettered stamp set and just use a sentiment. I like to do my insides, that way when I need a card, I can pull it out and it's all ready to go. I don't have to worry about anything else. I use You're the Best. Now here I got some fun foam. It's a trick I learned from Jennifer McGuire when you want to add some dimension, especially to a really large piece. You don't have to worry about using strips of foam mount tape or Stampin' Up! Dimensionals. One nice piece. I get my fun foam at Hobby Lobby, use a coupon. It comes in really long sheets and I just cut it down. Now I do cut my fun foam slightly smaller than the piece of cardstock it's going under, so this fun foam is cut to probably 3 3/4 by 5 or so. I'm just going to use my ATG gun and attach it to my card base, which is Stampin' Up! Basic Gray. Now remember, the fun foam is not going to go to the ends, so you don't want to use adhesive on the very ends. So I'm just kind of eyeballing the adhesive right in the middle. I'll lay my fun foam right on top. Now I'm using the white fun foam. If I had a dark colored cardstock, it also comes in black, so I'd use black fun foam there. Then I'm going to use the ATG and add some adhesive to the back of my cardstock piece, and then attach that right on top of the fun foam. And the fun foam gives a nice solid surface as well. It's not, you can't really bend it. It just feels really nice when you're when you're the receiver of the handmade card. Feels very substantial. And when you first attach the front of the card to the fun foam, it's really easy to pull up if you need to realign. Once you press it down and leave it for a few minutes, then it becomes nice and permanent, so you don't have to worry about it falling off. And if you are worried about that, add a squirt of Ranger Multi-Medium or some glossy accents just to the corners. But that does take quite a while to dry, that liquid adhesive on the fun foam, so just keep that in mind. Now I'm going to tape down the inside piece to the card base. Probably used a little bit too much adhesive there. You don't need quite that much since it's just one regular piece of cardstock you're attaching. Again, I cut that a little slightly smaller than the A2, so you have a nice border. So there's a simple thank you card. I want to thank everybody for watching my first video. Hope you liked it. Leave me a comment, and I hope to have more videos posted soon.